Alright, today we're going to be looking at inverse matrices. The first thing we need to do is talk about what an identity matrix is. The identity matrix is like a 1 in multiplying. It's the identity. So the identity matrix always has 1s on the diagonals and 0s in all the other spots. So the identity matrix of a 2 by 2 would be 1, 0, 0, 1. The identity of a 3 by 3 would be 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1. That's the identity. When we look at the inverse matrix, the identity comes into play there. We look at the inverse, so the inverse of matrix A would be A, and we note that with a -1 as the exponent, so that means A inverse. That doesn't mean that everything's negative, it just means it's the inverse. The definition of an inverse is that matrix A times the inverse of matrix A, so A times its inverse, is equal to the identity matrix. This is similar to in basic multiplying. If I were to have something like 3 times 1/3, that would equal 1, because 1/3 is the inverse of 3. That same idea, it's getting 1. The identity matrix is like our 1, like I said before, is like our 1. So our inverse, we know that A times its inverse is always equal to the identity. That's how you can check yourself. The definition to find the inverse of a matrix, so the inverse of matrix A is 1 over the determinant of A times D negative B negative C A. And that's when you're looking at matrix A being equal to A, B, C, D in that situation. So again, what we looked at yesterday is we know that the determinant is AD minus CB. So we'd have 1 over AD minus CB times D negative B negative CA. That's how you would find an inverse by hand. We're not going to be doing them by hand. We'll do it in a calculator. However, we need to look at when an inverse does not exist. So this inverse does not exist. So we'll say the inverse does not exist when the determinant of A equals 0, because that would give us 1 divided by 0, which is not true. Another way we could say this is it does not exist when AD minus CB equals 0, because that would make us a 1 over 0. If that situation occurred, then our inverse matrix would not exist. So that's just your background on inverse matrices. Now, how we're going to do the inverse matrices is we're going to do them on your calculator. So if our question was find the inverse of the matrix 3, 8, 2, 5. So if we wanted to find the inverse of this matrix, so we'd be finding 3, 8, 2, 5. We'd be finding the inverse of that. In order to do this in our calculator, first we need to create the create the matrix in our calculator. So we'd hit alpha zoom. So we did alpha zoom. Okay, we need to determine the number of rows and columns. This is a 2 by 2 matrix, so we're going to choose a 2 by 2 matrix. Now we're going to plug our matrix in. So we've got 3, 8, 2, 5. So we plug our matrix in, and we're going to click outside. So we'll right arrow outside. So type in numbers, right arrow outside the matrix. Okay, then we're going to hit this x -1 button. Oops, you can't see it. Right here below math, you've got x to the -1. We know that means inverse because we just talked about that exponent of -1 means inverse. We'll hit that. That's going to tell us what the inverse is. So we're going to hit the x -1 button, which means x inverse. Hit enter. And that'll spit out our inverse matrix. So the inverse of 3, 8, 2, 5 is the matrix -5, 8, 2, -3. So that would be our answer. Okay, same thing happens if we have a 3 by 3. So if I have the matrix 1, 0, -2, 3, 2, 1, -1, 1, 4. So if this is my matrix and we want to find the inverse of that matrix, we're going to type that into our calculator. So alpha zoom. Now this is a 3 by 3, so we'll choose 3 by 3. and we type it in. 1, 0, negative 2, 3, 2, 1. Be careful to type them incorrectly. Negative 1, 1, 4. Scroll to the outside, hit the inverse button, so we know that we're going to find the inverse of this matrix. Hit enter, and you notice we have a bunch of crazy decimals. These are all 0.3s and 0.6s. We don't want to write those down as our answer, so we want to convert these to fractions. So to convert to fractions, we're going to hit math, enter, enter, and that'll put my answers into fractions, which are a lot easier. So if fractions, we're going to do math, enter, enter. And those are all buttons on your calculator. So we'll write down our answer as negative 7/3, 2/3, negative 4/3, 13/3, negative 2/3, 7/3, negative 5/3, 1/3, negative 2/3. Now, to check our answer and make sure we type things in correctly, we want to make sure that we come back up and we realize that A times A inverse is equal to our identity. Now, the unfortunate thing is that your calculator isn't going to let you type in both of these 3x3s using the AlphaZoom method. There's another method, but let's just, for good measure, looking up at this original problem that we did. So we want to make sure that A times A inverse is equal to our identity matrix. So if we hit AlphaZoom, make it 2x2, we would have 3, 8, 2, 5 was my A matrix. And it has to be A times A inverse. You have to do it in that order. So A times A inverse, so times our matrix that we got as our answer. So negative 5, 8, 2, 2, negative 3. When I do that, when I do A times A inverse, I should get my identity matrix, which is 1, 0, 0, 1. So we know that we got that question correct.